River of Forgotten Dreams, Living into You. Really amazing. I love it. Yes, I love that.
Are we talking about movies tonight?
Well, we started talking about movies, but we're going to shift gears now and actually begin this thing. Hi, I'm Robert McBride of All Classical FM, chatting it up tonight with Carlos Kalmar, the music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Good evening. Hey.
I think we should start by talking about Carnegie Hall.
What hall?
Or Carnegie, I understand.
Yeah,
Andrew Carnegie actually said his name that way. I don't know.
That's because they, back in East, they say Willamette.
Oh. What do they know? So was it cool shirt. Was it one of the highlights of your life?
Of course it was.
Yeah.
Admittedly so. I was very, very down to earth before, and I was very down to earth afterwards. But during it's a very special moment when we all came out and there were, I don't know, 400 people waving green hankies. Oregon.
Was anybody there that night in Carnegie Hall?
Yay!
Yeah.
Green hankies.
Got a green hanky to prove it. Yeah. Were you nervous at all?
No.
You don't get nervous.
No.
He knows what he's doing. What's to be nervous about?
Yeah, well, the great thing about our trip to Carnegie was that the orchestra was very comfortable too. Because, I mean, this is an enormous deal to go to Carnegie. And on top of that, the program that I assume most of you heard that we played just the weekend before was really difficult. I mean, in terms of technical skills, ability, musical output, and of course also in terms of stamina. Very physically demanding thing. I was pretty sure that we would do well. I tell you the truth. I was sure that this would go well, but I did not expect that it would go this well, and that the New Yorkers would say, "Oh my God, that's an orchestra."
Just what we need. The New York Times writing more about Portland. We'll have more people moving.
Isn't that still valid? Come and visit, but don't stay.
I kind of liked that, actually, back in the day. Yeah. Well, congratulations. It was all very wonderful and exciting, and wish I could have been there, but it was fun having it on the radio. I was actually sick, so I was at home listening like an ordinary civilian that day.
Yeah, it was really good, and we had the day of the concert. That is what every orchestra that went to this festival got. You get a rehearsal in Carnegie, which we used mainly just to feel comfortable. Because as fascinating as this may be, Carnegie Hall is 30 seats larger than this hall, but it doesn't look that way. It looks smaller, more intimate, and of course it's shaped differently because there are many segments that go up, not one large segment that goes up. And of course we all knew that the acoustics would be very, very different. So that was our primary work in the rehearsal was two things. First of all, check the acoustic and adapt to that. And second, let's make everybody comfortable in terms of the many tricky spots that we had to play in all the works, including, of course, making Sanford comfortable there.
Oh, right, your soloist, yes.
And so that everybody feels at home and everybody knows how we should approach sound. And I remember that before we went, when we were still here in Portland, and I was talking to Sanford and told him, you know, as strange as this may be, I have never been in Carnegie Hall, and I've never even seen a concert there before. And he said he will love it. It's like a big living room. And he was right. So what happened there was that most of the time what we had to do is tame it down. This hall, the Schnitz requires us on stage to play very big at moments, very it's kind of a muscular approach. And Carnegie Hall, I mean, you can do that, but with the insane intensity of the pieces we went there, it's too much. I mean, this is not, just to tell you the truth, this is not a phenomenon that happens here in Portland, Oregon. I remember, first of all, one of the most famous things in regards to acoustics before and after, so to speak, is the Philadelphia Orchestra. The Philadelphia Orchestra probably has the lushest string sound you can have in this country. And the reason is the hall they played before they moved to the Kimmel Center was actually not at all. It was a pretty crappy hall, so they had to really work it over decades. So they get this very famous sound, and then they move to the Kimmel Center, which unfortunately isn't a perfect place either. And all of a sudden things happen, and we don't even have to look across country. We can look just 2 hours flight south, Los Angeles. I remember that when LA Phil, at that time was Esa-Pekka Salonen as music director, when they moved into the Frank Gehry building, into the Disney Hall where they are now, the first thing because everybody played as they were playing before, and the first thing like, whoa, not so much, because all of a sudden it's there. And so this is just normality, and that's what you have to do whenever you travel. You always have to use at least half an hour of your time just to adapt the orchestra to the surroundings. Every hall needs a different type of approach to sound. Sometimes it's only marginal, and sometimes it's a big adjustment, and that's what we did.
And in the performances here, before the orchestra went to Carnegie Hall with that program, 2 concerts here were recorded. That CD will be out in the fall sometime?
In the fall,
okay. Yeah. So we'll all be able to have a copy of that, and I'm really looking forward to that. Will you autograph it for me?
Of course I will.
Okay. I actually don't have very many autographs.
I will autograph it for everybody who wants it.
Good man, isn't he? Speaking of which, the Classical Millennium folks, as usual, have their table in the lobby tonight with CDs of everything that you're going to hear on tonight's concert, I think, if they're all recorded. I don't know if Doherty's piece has been recorded.
Oh, yes, it has. Okay. There is one recording out there that has a lot of Doherty, including Flamingo.
He's a wacky guy, composer. Boy. All right, this is a really, really fun and unusual concert. And thinking about it today, I realized I've never seen a concert like this, where so many soloists from an orchestra are paraded out, one after another, for the whole first half of the concert. We've got 8 soloists tonight.
Well, on one side you might argue, well, it was around time that you do that. On the other side, I don't think that you have to do that every year. This is a very special occasion. We did one thing just last week, which was for the first time in 116 years, which is going to New York, and we did very well. So this is the time to celebrate this wonderful orchestra and to put out in front of you so many solos that we have in our orchestra, so you can really enjoy them, and that makes it together a really program that is only fun.
I stand corrected. 9 soloists tonight. 9.
Speaking of soloists, did you hear in the broadcast from Carnegie Hall all the coughing soloists we had?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's I thought about that. Well, you just keep going, but I thought it was so great to do that same piece here with all of you present in Portland, because I don't know what Elaine said before I came out. Maybe she threatened all of you or something, but it was very quiet.
So we have all these pieces tonight in the first half of the concert, all these different composers, all these different soloists from the orchestra, most of them principal players, but not all of them, like Todd Kuhn's clarinet. He's assistant principal, and the the flutist is actually the acting principal flutist, so she gets to have a solo. And then on the second half of the concert, the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, where everybody gets to show off. So, in the limited time that we have, which pieces do you want to talk about?
Well, of course, look, you can't tell that much about certain pieces that we are presenting in the first half, because there is not so much to tell. For example, let's just go into the middle. There is this Pezzo Capriccioso for cello and orchestra by Tchaikovsky. It's a really nice piece of music for a cello, and that's pretty much all I can say about the piece. It's Tchaikovsky. It has actually both elements that we adore about Tchaikovsky, which is very heartfelt lyricism and virtuosity as well, and that's all. The piece doesn't really have a story, and maybe other. You can, of course, tell the story of when we start the concert, the fanfare from La Peri. Before we did this, I didn't know that this is the last piece that Mr. Paul Dukas wrote in his life. And this is another composer who just stopped writing long before he died. And the reason for this might be that Dukas was incredibly critical of himself. And he just probably burned and threw away a lot of his music, which is a shame. Good composer. And then he writes this La Peri, which is kind of it's a tale about a miraculous flower that is being guarded by a Persian fairy, La Peri, and very ethereal.
And yet that's not what you're playing tonight.
And that is not what we're playing tonight, because we are playing the fanfare, which is
completely different.
It's a fanfare.
It's like it's kind of like he wrote that just to get everybody's attention, and then you go into this ballet, which is an utterly different world.
Yeah. It's a very different world. Fine. I mean,
your attention too. All the brass.
Yeah. And they play this so well. I mean, we have such a great brass section, just to start with. And I also like this program very much because the program is incredibly moody. So you go from that into, meaning that muscular if you want, brassy piece, into the Trauermusik by Paul Hindemith. And that story, the morning music by Paul Hindemith, is, at least from what I know, probably the fastest, the piece in musical history that made it to the charts, that was written the fastest. He wrote it in 6 hours. And he played it the same night. Because Paul Hindemith was a viola player. And he was at that time in London, because he had to perform, I think it was probably the BBC Orchestra with Sir Adrian Boult. He had to perform his own concerto called the Schwanendreher, the Swan Turner in English, which is kind of a slightly wacky, at times very fun piece. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, George V dies. And so he and Adrian Boult were talking like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they didn't come up with any viable solution. Probably Beethoven, Eroica, second movement was out of the question for whatever reason. They didn't find anything. So Hindemith said, okay, the concert is tonight, lock me up, I'll write something. So he wrote this it's a little gem of a piece. It even has 4 movements, very short movements. The entire piece is 8 minutes long, maybe. But it is really good music. It makes the viola shine. It's only viola and the string orchestra, and at the end, the last movement, which is very quiet, is a Bach chorale. with the words, vor deinen Thron trete ich hier mit, before thine throne
Before thy throne I come with this, or something to that effect. Allegedly the last music Bach wrote, which is interesting. Before thy throne I come with it. Wow.
As you know, Bach is so full of symbolism that you can, don't get me started on that one. But that's a great piece.
Which Dan Hindeman later found out was known well in England. It was very popular. Nice coincidence.
Yeah.
So, George V, that would be Michael Gambon's character if you saw the King's Speech.
I want to say, if you haven't seen the King's Speech, please go.
On the other hand, last night I saw, what's the name of that movie I was just telling you about? Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which is playing at living room theaters and elsewhere too, about the caves in France that were discovered in 1994 that are full of 30,000-year-old cave paintings. And the movie's in 3D. It's amazing and wonderful.
Oh, great.
The music is very different than the soundtrack to the King's Speech, but...
Really?
But we digress, as we so often do. You know, the other piece on the first half of the concert features Jun Iwasaki, the concertmaster. Now, to tell you the truth, I'm not always really crazy about violin showpiece things because they often sound to me like they were written by violinists for violinists, and I go, yeah, it's cool that you can do all that, but is it a really rewarding musical experience for me as a listener? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. But since I love Ravel so much, I've always loved Tzigane, and I've never watched anybody play it, so thank you for giving me a chance.
Well, that is the final piece in the first half before we go into the break, and as funny as this may be, this is a piece that got very popular. It's Tzigane, meaning gypsy, and Hungarians, who have something to do with gypsies, of course, actually, Hungarian musicians really hated the piece. But okay, the truth is, if you're waiting for a piece that is virtuosic and really sexy, that is the piece. It is incredible. The colors of the violin. For Ravel, it's a small orchestra. Selected woodwinds and harp, no percussion, so that's small. But the color that he gets even out of the violin, I adore that moment towards, it's slow and fast. And in the fast section, which wanders around, there's one section that I adore always. I always have a hard time not to look at June and to smile all the time. When the sound has to be very scratchy. That's what the composer demands, and that's what you will hear. It's like wonderful.
Earthy.
Yeah.
That earthy Hungarian gypsy fiddle player thing.
Yes.
The tubist's name, Jatik Clark?
Jatik Clark. Jatik. It's that simple. Jatik Clark.
Nice man, great player.
A wonderful man whom you have so often seen there. And Jatik has been with our orchestra for quite a while.
Does he get to come up front tonight for a change?
Of course, okay, of course. And we all know, tuba. What do you expect from tuba? Bo, 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 bo. You'll be really surprised. And here we are talking about Jeff Tysick's work, who is our principal conductor, and he's a really wonderful composer, and he must really like the tuba because he wrote a suite in 4 movements. The tango you're going to hear tonight, it's only 1. And you're going to enjoy the fact that actually tuba is a really musical instrument.
Oh, yeah. There's one dressing room next to the maestro's dressing room backstage, and then there are other dressing rooms upstairs. And Jatik gets the one downstairs, I assume because he's the one who's got to carry the heaviest instrument around, right?
Well, I only heard that while I'm here over the entire first half, my own dressing room is kind of the holding cell for everybody who needs to come out.
That's a nice photo op.
Yeah.
Now, so you're parading out all these different people, so how much time will there be between pieces?
As little as we can. I mean, there is you have to pardon the set changes that we have to do tonight, because there are going to be set changes, but we have such a great crew here at the Schnitz, and our stage manager Chris is so wonderful, and they are so well organized. It will go very quickly, but you have to understand, usually you have soloists on this side of the stage. That's what we are used. Well, Jatik plays on the other side. And the reason is the way his bell is pointed. It's kind of obvious, because he plays and the bell is on this side. So if he would play on this side, he would turn the back to me. And actually we get along very well. So he plays on that side, and Nancy Ives, our principal cellist, when she plays the Tchaikovsky, she needs, what's it called?
It's sort of like this kind of platform.
She needs a little platform, a riser. And then it comes the big moment, of course, which is kind of the most complicated setting, which is when the piece for the two tambourine players comes. Flamingo by Michael Doherty, inspired by the fact that Michael Doherty, I think that's the first time he kind of thought about something like that. He drove with his family south, and somewhere south in the United States, he started seeing in the gardens plastic flamingos. I don't know, but I've never seen. We have so wonderful gardens here in Oregon. I've never seen. Does anybody of you have a flamingo in the garden? And I have to clarify that although it looks like that, the position in which the players play the piece, the two soloists, has actually not really something to do with the title, although they play it this way. They have one foot on a stool, because you will see why. There are different forms to play tambourines, and each of them has 3 tambourines. It's like, I mean, we here in Portland, we understand that very well, because we are so enamored with coffee. So, I mean, it's either small, medium, or large. And that's what they have. Tambourine, small, medium, or large.
All right, and then the other piece is the Saint-Saëns Tarantella for flute and clarinet.
Yes.
There's a really cute story about that piece in your program notes having to do with Rossini.
Yeah, which is very understandable if you hear the piece, because you think that's a piece by Rossini. So at first listening in a salon organized by Rossini, people thought, "Bravo, maestro," referring to Rossini, until Rossini said, "It's not my piece, it's his piece."
This 22-year-old kid who was over there. I love that. And then, after intermission, the big concerto for orchestra, 20th century classic by Bela Bartok. There's an interesting thing about this concerto for orchestra. That's what it is. What the name implies, that he shows off all the sections of the orchestra. And there are some individual solos, and in one moment there's a delightful presentation of pairs of wind instruments and trumpets, but there aren't any solo string parts, which I didn't really realize until yesterday. I wonder why he didn't give the concertmaster a solo or something.
But I think he did that on purpose, because what he does is he features sections. It's also kind of rare, happens in the third movement. But other than that, it's kind of rare that he features one single instrument. The third movement features the oboe pretty prominently and the piccolo flute, and that's it. But it's either the first violins or the cello as a group, etc., etc. And if I only look especially at the last movement, this kind of frantic, very fast virtuosic piece of music, well, you don't need more solo than that. They are so busy tackling all these insanely speedy notes. It's really fun. Now, this piece by Bela Bartok has actually in a way, it has a sad background, because we in our days all understand that that Bela Bartok, undoubtedly one of the greatest composers of the 20th century, and we owe him big time. He wrote some magnificent music, be that for orchestra, be that piano concertos or his string quartets. Oh my God, incredible music, quite complex, the string quartets, but fantastic music. And then many tragic things happened to him at the same time, which was, first of all, his country, Hungary, was occupied by the Nazis, and he fled in 1940, arriving in the United States, and he was not successful. He kind of started teaching only, I think, one semester at the most at Columbia University, and it didn't go well. He wasn't renewed. He did a couple. He was a pianist, and his recitals were not well received. So he was going very close to poverty. A man like this, and on top of so he was going through hard times, fighting a huge depression, and then he was diagnosed with leukemia. On top of that, and Bartok during this entire life was very frail. So at least I read in one of the articles that he was pretty much weighing 90 pounds when he was admitted to the hospital. And there, through fellow Hungarian musicians, who of course did it very secretly, because Bartok, very private person, and really hated any idea of charity. So these, mainly probably the lead was taken by Josef Szigeti, the great violinist, and Fritz Reiner, music director of the Chicago Symphony. They kind of talked to the music director of the Boston Symphony, Serge Kuzevitsky. And Kuzevitsky visited Bartok in the hospital with a check in his hand and said, Bela, this is my down payment for a piece that I want you to write. And the miracle happened. He recovered right there, left the hospital within days, went to upstate New York, wrote the piece in quite a small period of time, and this is one of the most successful things that he has ever done. This piece was later, when it was premiered, received by the critics and by the public with enormous praise, and Bartok at that time received quite a few other commissions which you could not complete because, I mean, he had leukemia and he died pretty soon after the premiere of the piece. But at least his testament is the piece that is going to be in front of you tonight, after the break. It's a phenomenal piece of music, and as far as orchestra culture goes, I can tell you, you cannot find any orchestra in the world who does not need, not only want, but need to tackle this piece every 5 years. This is a must. It's like when you think about the orchestra repertoire overall, there must be Beethoven 9, Beethoven 5, Brahms symphonies, etc. It's all things that have to be there every 5 years. This is one of those pieces. It needs to be there, and I am very, very happy that we can play this and finish our season with that.
What a spectacular way to end the season. Thank you for coming to the chat tonight. We did videotape this, as we do every Saturday night. You can tell your friends they can watch it at allclassical.org. Enjoy the concert, and we'll see you next season. Carlos Kalmar.
Robert McBride.
Bravo.